All right, I'm Dave Taylor. Thank you. The second half, I think, will be nice and lively. I've already ascertained that there is not complete unanimity on our panel. It's also an intimidatingly large panel of very bright people. So what I'm going to do is, instead of having something that I'm going to read, which will probably be fairly boring, I'm going to actually allow each of them to introduce themselves. So why don't we start with you, if you don't mind, Burke?
Sure. My name is Burke Fort. I'm on the faculty at the Colorado School of Mines. I'm director of the Eighth Continent Project, which is a entrepreneurial support economic development initiative using aerospace-derived technology and putting it into global markets.
I'm Robert Zubrin. I'm president of the Mars Society. I'm also president of Pioneer Astronautics, which is a company that does R&D for NASA and others, and I'm also the author of a number of books, including The Case for Mars.
I'm Theresa Degroat. I'm president and founder of Flare Inc., and we are producers of space science education products such as the Map of Mars, an information sheet, Hubble Science Cards, and Cosmology Information Sheet, and Lunar Map, as well as other products.
Hi, I'm Dan Shelley from MenScience. I'm president of MenScience Corporation. We're a small business in Golden, Colorado, doing science instruments and various science activities associated with NASA. We're tied in with Southwest Research, hopefully soon, on some things, and some other programs with some other small companies that have collected together in Golden.
And I think you know me already. Brian and Keith, Southwest Research Institute. So I'll give up my time here.
Okay, I have some questions on my iPad, if it continues to work. But really what we like to do with these panels is we like to have you guys ask questions. So I will, right from the get-go, invite anyone who has a question to raise your hand, and we'll go with that. I will warn you that I am absolutely expecting you will ask a question and it will spark a conversation that will probably wander in tangential directions. So, you agree? You think it's going to happen? Cool. All right.
You know, what I don't understand is what's the benefit of going to Mars? And, you know, one of the things about NASA in the early days in particular is we developed a lot of new technologies, from computers and a whole bunch of other things that filtered out into the commercial world. But I haven't heard anything as to why we should go to Mars and what are we going to get out of this. It's nice to spend money and I like technology, but I'm always kind of looking, you know, what's the kind of the upside down the road?
Well, as I see it, there's three reasons. For the challenge, for the science, and for the future. In terms of the science, Mars is the Rosetta Stone that's going to let us know the truth about the potential prevalence and diversity of life in the universe. Okay? It is because it is a planet that once was warm and wet for 1 billion years, and if the theory is correct that life evolves from chemistry wherever you have an appropriate environment, should have appeared on Mars. We may be able to find fossils, we may be able to find extant life underground on Mars, examine its biochemistry, find out if the biochemistry of Mars life is the same as Earth life, all Earth life has the same biochemistry. I could go on that, but to switch to the next, the challenge, and this is extremely important. I think that societies are like individuals. We grow when we're challenged, we stagnate when we're not. And embracing challenge is extremely healthy. Embracing the challenge of Mars would be extremely healthy for this society. It would say to every young person in it, learn your science and you could be a pioneer of new worlds. And out of that challenge, we would get, as we got out of Apollo, the main thing we got out of Apollo wasn't technological spin-offs, Teflon and this and that. The main thing we got out of Apollo was a doubling of the number of science graduates in this country at every level, high school, college, and PhD. And who were those 40-year-old technological entrepreneurs who built Silicon Valley in the 1990s? They were the 12-year-old little boy scientists in the 1960s who got hyped into science because of Apollo. Well, in this generation, there would not just be little boy scientists, there'd be little girl scientists as well, and engineers, inventors, the rest. And the basis of the wealth of a society is its intellectual capital. This is a tremendous way to develop intellectual capital. And then finally, the future. Okay, Mars is a world It's a world, okay, with a surface area equal to all the continents of the Earth put together, and which has on it all the resources needed to support life, and therefore potentially civilization. And if we can do what is our portion in our time, which is establish that first little human foothold on Mars, then in the fullness of time, within a couple of 100 years, there will be new branches of human civilization on Mars, okay? And, you know, new branches of human civilization with their own customs, their own ideas on human social organization. They'll have made contributions to science and technology and invention. They'll certainly have their history of epic deeds that will be used to inspire people to go further, okay? And that is something truly wonderful. That is the grandest thing you can do. You know, in 1492, a lot of things happened in Europe in 1492. There was a peace treaty negotiated between England and France. The Borgias took over the papacy. Lorenzo de' Medici died. Okay, but we here, I mean, Americans in general, don't know any of that and don't care. What we care about, in terms of what happened in 1492, was that this Italian weaver's son got his hands on a few ships and was able to sail it west across an ocean that no one had ever returned from. And by so doing, planted the seeds of a new branch of human civilization, which includes us, okay? And all these maneuvers, the Borgias taking over the papacy, the papacy, so forth, and the fortunes of the Medici, and the English crown and the French crown, who cares, okay? 500 years from now, no one's going to care who came out on top in Iraq, okay? They won't even know what Iraq was. Okay, but what we did to make their civilizations on Mars and on Tor Ceti possible, okay, that's what will matter. So the reason why we should go to Mars is in order to do something that will really matter.
I don't really think I can add to that, except the technologies that we will develop in the pursuit of Mars will help to spur our economy, will create new jobs, and this, I believe, is one of the big factors in the new NASA plan.
Well, I certainly agree with Bob as far as the human endeavor part of it. There is something to that. Given what's happened on Mars so far, though, at least from a public perspective, the amount of monies that are spent, what's been the science return on missions that have been done so far. And in the short term, regardless of any civilization aspects of it, the short term, we haven't done a very good job in our spending on Mars missions so far. We could have done a much better job. You know, in our own experience with my company, we've had interactions with NASA where they have increased costs tremendously because they wanted to keep an instrument within-house. And this is more of a substantive idea that you're playing in a field where NASA is continuing to support their own efforts, and that's fine. But the science return on investments haven't been the greatest. So a better science on return on investment up front would certainly lead to what Bob's talking about 100 years down the road. We get there faster, certainly, but we haven't done a great job of it so far.
I think the only thing I'll add very quickly is some of these new technologies. I look at it slightly a wider view, a more simple view. Basically, I'm passionate about Mars settlement. So if you think about what that means, people living on another planet in an extremely harsh environment by earthly standards, the technologies that will allow people to live on Mars are directly exportable back to Earth to allow us to live better on the Earth. And I think I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, so actually, we'll let you add something, and then I want to actually go in a slightly different direction on this. So.
Okay, I'd like to ask the audience, were these satisfying responses to you? Did it make you want to pick up the phone and call your congressman tomorrow and say, by golly, we really got to ramp up the support, the money, the budget for NASA? Did that register with you? Please raise your hands if that was compelling. Okay. So about half in the room, and I would venture to guess that perhaps, were there any new converts in that answer? Or was this something you actually walked in the room with already as far as your opinion was concerned? Anybody changed their mind based on what we just heard? 1, 2. Okay, that's good. That's good. And part of that is the the context of actually getting the word out. But context to me is larger than that. There are a lot of people out there that the grand challenge is to feed their family next week, to have a job, to have something make sense. And so when it comes to priorities in making real decisions in the short term, because that's after all what most of us have time to think about, it hasn't translated up to this point. And I think part of that isn't because there isn't value there, but is actually because that value has not been fully articulated to everyday people. If you go back, you see year after year after year, the NASA has commissioned a study to try to ascertain what the support for the space program is. And they've come back, and it's a kind of a canned phrase now, that support for the space program is a mile wide and an inch deep. Part of that is because, in my view, there is no personal connection still established for a lot of people in the United States. Obviously, the group up here on the stage accepted. I'm passionately convinced as well. But there are a lot of people who don't even know what NASA stands for, can't tell you even the most basic contributions that it's made to life and that sort of thing. And I think that's where our challenge is. If we are actually able to connect with more people, and I have a theory as to how to do that, then those people will call their congressman. They will say, you know, you really do need to support NASA because it matters to me personally. One of those areas might very well be an area that was mentioned, spin-offs, and how NASA has actually provided a variety of technologies and processes that have benefited everyday people here on Earth. But even at that, the latest cancer treatments or other systems that they've been involved with, the story hasn't been driven home yet that, hey, you know, actually if you take a look at your job and you trace back the basic technology that your job is based upon, that you're feeding your family with, you'd be surprised actually how many more people it actually affects personally, people who don't realize that it affects them personally. Examples could include, for example, the magnetic strip on the back of your credit card. That is space-derived technology. It is a space commerce concept because you take your credit card, you go to the gas station, you put it in the pump, you pull it back out again, and that information about who you are goes on your magnetic strip, goes to a company that owns bandwidth on a telecommunications satellite, bounces it off that spacecraft to say New York City, says, yeah, Burke Fort pays his credit card bill, let him pump gas. Okay, that is not as sexy, it is not as compelling for a lot of us who really have this passionate urge to be on Mars, to see human being on Mars before our life is over. But I would submit to you that by raising the awareness of the real contributions in dollars and cents, jobs created, jobs retained, and not just by aerospace engineers, not by that seemingly vertical stovepipe populated by highly educated people that everyday people look at and say, wow, I'm really glad that they're American, look what they've done for America, and I'm proud, but I don't really feel a personal connection. And I'd like to suggest to you that some aspects of the new administration's policy may or may not be an opportunity to advance that. We certainly could have done it under Constellation as well. We could have done it under any iteration, but that message has not been fully delivered. And until it is, we're not going to have people calling their congressman and saying, you've really got to fund this.
So let me jump in here because I think that there's actually a huge difference between when we had Gemini and Apollo and all of those programs and what we have now. And the big difference is the privatization of individual elements of space research and of development of launch vehicles and all this sort of thing. And where
How so?
Well, where I think, let me finish my question then see if it'll make sense. Where I think it's different is that when we have privatization and we outsource individual aspects of development, then the ownership of the intellectual property becomes a lot more fuzzy. And so my concern would be that we fund NASA, and I might not be speaking for anyone else, but we fund NASA, they outsource big, huge chunks of developing a Mars base, and it turns out those companies actually own that. And so the benefit that would trickle down to the rest of society is much more constrained and much more limited than it would be when the Apollo engineers were developing things. Is that something you think is an issue? Because obviously privatization, we've actually had that here at an earlier evening discussion. It's a huge change in how we are approaching development of space technology.
Well, when the Gemini astronauts flew to orbit, they flew on a rocket built by the Martin Company. Okay, and when John Glenn flew to orbit, he flew on a rocket built by General Dynamics. Okay, and when Apollo astronauts flew, they flew on a rocket built by Rockwell and Boeing. I mean, this is not new. There's nothing new here. And for Elon Musk to get a contract to develop his Falcon 9, it's not new. So this privatization stuff, there's a lot less here that meets the eye in terms of there being anything new. Okay, the Mars rovers were launched to Mars on privately built rockets. But what was different was they actually had a goal. They were going somewhere. Okay, and the thing that made that program inspiring, nobody who watched the Gemini launch was inspired by the fact that the rocket was built by a private company. Okay, they were inspired by the fact that for the first time 2 people were flying in space, and we did 4 days in space, and we did a spacewalk, and then we did a space rendezvous, and it was all part of going to the moon, which we actually did. Okay, and furthermore, the moon program was, for anyone who was following it, it was a step on the Mars program. We're going to be on Mars by 1981. Okay, and so we were pushing out into space. We were doing it visibly. We were making visible progress. Okay, and millions of kids wanted to be part of that and did it. Okay, and as far as pay at the pump with your credit card, frankly, I liked it better when you paid with cash and it was 36 cents a gallon. The thing that's inspiring about the space program is not that it has created pay at the pump. The thing is when we actually go and do something. And frankly, I'm amazed at the American people for the patience. These people must be total space freaks. You ask them, how much of the federal budget do you think we're spending on the space program? The answer comes back, 10%. And is that too much, too little, or about right? And they say, that's about right. According to the American people, 10% of the Americans' budget should be spent on the space program, and which would be $200 billion NASA budget. Okay, roughly, or 250, yeah. So 15 times what it's actually getting. Okay, and furthermore, they're willing to do this even though everything, frankly, I think the robotic program to Mars has been a remarkable success. It may have cost more than it should, but it's there, and they've actually do this stuff, and the rovers are on Mars, and there's another one coming, and the manned space program hasn't done anything significant other than launch and repair Hubble in 35 years, and yet people still support it, and they've got incredible patience for this. And I think, by the way, main concern of the average American is not putting food on their table. It's whether their daughter is going to come home with a ring in her nose. Okay, and really, and I've gotten so many letters from parents who said, my son, he was really, there was something wrong with him. He was into this stuff with the video games and the black trench coats and hanging out at the mall with the skateboarders and in this and that. And he read your book, and now he's at MIT, and we are so grateful to you. Okay, and if the space program was doing that for the parents of America, they would support it through thick and thin.
Okay, we actually, do you guys want to add to that, or, because we do have a very patient chap sitting here.
I could just add a quick word maybe, because I think part of the intent of your question might not have been covered there yet. The property rights, the patent rights, things like that. That also is something that I don't see really changing. It's always been that way, and in our society, in our capitalist society, this is the way that progress is made. It goes through corporations. Eventually, corporations come and go, patents expire. This is just how it works. And so I really don't see a problem there in terms of future Mars settlement technologies, for example, like you said. It will lead to the progress that we need eventually.
Yeah, just an add on that, actually, I think it'll accelerate under more of a commercially centric policy, the ascent to Mars. It's arguable anyway. I know we have an argument over that, but the truth of the matter is that having secure access to intellectual property has always been a catalyst for our capital markets, equity and debt financing, and the amount of capital that is available in the capital markets makes the amount of capital available from government funding pale in comparison.
My name's Ryan Wood with Frontline Aerospace, and my question is sort of a practical one, a Russian one, as you say. We have to get to Mars, and we can't do it with a chemical rocket. I mean, it
What
just
makes you think that?
What? You
We
can't.
send lots of things to Mars with chemical rockets.
I'm certainly that's true. If you want to do manned chemical rocket or manned mission to Mars in a reasonable amount of time, I
It takes
recommend.
6 months to fly to Mars with a chemical rocket.
Well, I know. Well, why not use a fusion rocket? Get there in a week.
Because we don't have one.
They've been tested and used in the 60s and 70s by Rocketdyne and General Atomics. I mean, it all works. It's military. It's probably classified. Although you can get some of the stuff. Has that been? The question is, has that been considered and analyzed? Is it even in the discussion? It may not be in the U.S. discussion, but in the Russian discussion, the Indian discussion, and the Chinese discussion, we'll put a space shuttle up, pop on a nuclear or fusion rocket. We're going to be there fast, and I don't care if we're spewing radiation out in space. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter to their environment or their attitude and culture. So that's my sort of commentary or open. You know, are you guys willing to go there?
All right,
And,
well, let me
push
just
that?
answer this. Okay, the nuclear rockets that were tested in the United States in the 1960s were fission rockets, not fusion rockets. And they worked by sending hydrogen through a solid nuclear core that was in a critical state, and it heats the hydrogen to high temperatures, exhausts it out a nozzle, and you get about twice the specific impulse of a chemical rocket. The main advantage, this is a good technology, the NERVA rover technology. It would cut the launch mass of a Mars mission by about a factor of 2, but it would not substantially speed it up. Now, there is but I think that should be developed. That's a useful technology, no doubt. There is a technology that's being talked about, and it's appearing in magazines like Popular Science and current issue of Seed magazine, called the Vasimir, which is an electric thruster, a plasma thruster. It's not a fusion thruster, though. It is a plasma that is heated with microwaves that has to be powered by a power source that does not exist. And so this technology is essentially a hoax. Its inventor says, well, all we have to do is launch into space a power source equal to that of a nuclear submarine, which would be 200,000 kilowatts, just 20,000 times larger than the largest space nuclear reactor, 10 kilowatts, that has ever flown. And furthermore, he requires it to be essentially weightless, or massless rather, which is not possible. And this is a very unfortunate development because what John Holdren, the president's science advisor, said, who's promulgated this policy, is we can't go to Mars until we have this. And in fact, we can't go to a near-Earth asteroid until we have this. Okay? Now, a near-Earth asteroid mission, I actually disagree with Brian. I don't think it's that ambitious a mission. It's a 6-month round-trip mission. That's the same time as a 6 months round-trip, not one way. That's the same duration as a standard rotation on the space station. It's entirely within our means. If Barack Obama really wanted to do a near-Earth asteroid mission, all he would have had to do is not cancel the Ares 5 booster program, not cancel the Orion capsule program, and use those two elements together with a space station module, and you could shoot people off to a near-Earth asteroid, you know, co-orbit with it, examine it, and fly back home. He could have done that before the end of his second term. Instead, he says, well, not until we have this future propulsion system can we go into deep space. So far from enabling deep space exploration, the futuristic Vasimir propulsion system becomes an excuse for not doing deep space exploration. Okay? It's the enabling technology for those who do not want to go to Mars.
Well, nothing to add to that, I guess. But the Vasimir, from what I understand of it, it is not the answer. I agree with Bob there. It's just not the way it's going to happen. These new technologies that Obama is talking about are a wish list that no one seems to really understand what he's really talking about at this point. So we are, without chemical propulsion, we're not going to Mars, and chemical does work, but you got to take your time to get there. That's all there is to it. There's no way around it.
Robert's point of disagreement with me when I was talking about asteroid missions and how hard they are. I really wasn't talking in terms of the propulsion requirements. It's really more a matter of the fact that we don't know that much about asteroids right now compared to what we know about the Moon and Mars. Also, the operational environment around an asteroid is extremely difficult. And I'll leave it at that. There's other concerns too. We rattled off at work half a dozen of them within 2 minutes. It's going to be a difficult mission for other reasons than the propulsion.
I'm Bill Farrand. I'm with the Space Science Institute in Boulder. I'm actually on the Mars Exploration Rover Science team, so I would strongly disagree with the point that was made about not getting much science return from our robotic missions. But my question actually touches tangentially on the last one. The last question talked about the fact that this culture might not be willing to put a nuclear reactor into space, and I'm just very concerned. I think the biggest problem we face in trying to get to Mars to do space exploration in a big way involving humans is that our culture has become too risk averse. We're just too. It's just incredible that we won't do the things that need to be done. That we're afraid of, losing, one person. When, if you look back at the history of exploration, many people had to die before anything of value was accomplished. And or to take another example, if we do find through robotic missions that there are microbes that exist in the subsurface, there will be a tremendous constituency that will say, "Oh no, well we can't. Mars has to be hands off now. We can't disturb the microbes." So I just wonder if the panel might like to comment on some of those points.
Just on the science return part, I didn't mean to indicate that there wasn't any science return on given missions. The cost issue has been the problem. Mars Science Laboratory is now costing up to $2.6 billion. Oh, the MER rovers have done a great, yes, MER rovers have done a great job. I agree with what Bob said. They've been terrific. Steve Squires did a great job. He really did. They've been overwhelmingly successful and gone way past their lifetimes, it's obvious. But Mars Science Laboratory is the next one up, and that's the model that's being used for beyond Mars Science Laboratory. There's a mission called Astrobiology Field Laboratory, which was going to be the follow-on. That's now out of the picture because they don't have the money. It's gone. Mars Science Laboratory has eaten the shorts of just about every other program. The other question would be, how much science is left on Mars Science Laboratory? It's very hard. I've been to several meetings involved with Mars Science Laboratory where it's very difficult to get anyone pinned down to how much science is actually left on Mars Science Laboratory for your $2.6 billion. And there's the debate now whether you even fly in 2011. There are major issues with Mars Science Laboratory, and this is the model that they're using to take forward. There's a new NASA ESA mission called, I'm not sure what the name is, Brian, I guess, yeah. Well, they're going to start with an orbiter that's going to be a trace gas orbiter, and then they're talking about a lander. There are technologies on Mars Science Laboratory that are being dedicated to fly on that next mission, and they have not even been proven out yet. For one thing, even the mechanism for getting to the surface on this so-called sky crane, it's never been done. And now on the new NASA ESA mission, they're saying they want to do 2 rovers that way. We have no track record, and we're spending $2.6 billion, and so far it's very difficult to tell what we as taxpayers are getting for that money. And again, I don't know all the ins and outs not being at NASA, but I know I try to look at things from my own personal experience with our company. And we know we tried to supply an instrument to Mars Science Laboratory that was very cost effective. They went with a NASA version and are spending much more money. It has been descoped several times. It does not provide the full science that it was dedicated to. So there's a history that's not looking good for our future here as far as science return on missions.
I'd like to address the other part of your question, which was the issue of risk. I agree with you. There is and with what Brian Enke said during his talk, there really has to be a revision of our understanding of risk. And there's a narcissism to this business about we can't go until it is safe. Okay? You know, back in 2004, Sean O'Keefe announced that he was not prepared to send astronauts to the Hubble Space Telescope because it was too risky. Okay, now admittedly it is more risky to fly to the Hubble Space Telescope than not to fly to the Hubble Space Telescope. Okay, but what are these astronauts in space to do anyway? And what mission to low Earth orbit had more scientific return than that? And here you have, I mean, at the same time, 2004, my stepson was in the infantry, okay, and was not actually deployed to Iraq. He ended up being deployed to Europe, but he was in the infantry at a time when the infantry, most of them didn't have the body armor issued to them, okay, and here's NASA unwilling to risk 7 people on a mission to the Hubble Space Telescope, which was a $4 billion asset, which is the same price as an aircraft carrier, okay, and could you imagine, you know, the captain of an aircraft carrier coming back with the following report: the ship developed a leak, and there were 7 volunteers willing to go below to try to patch her up. But the odds in their favor were only 50 to 1, and so we decided to just give up the ship. Okay, I mean, that would, you know, it would have been court-martial. But yet this is the position that NASA took. And now here are these people saying, well, you know, before we go to Mars, we have to reduce the risk by spending a decade or 2 or 3 to develop better technology to do it. So for the next 10 years under the Obama plan, okay, we're going to work on technology. This is going to cost $100 billion. Under the Obama plan, we're going to spend 10 years and $100 billion going nowhere, okay, in order to marginally reduce the risk of 5 or 6 people who are on that mission to Mars. And you just think for a minute, whether you're talking about body armor for the troops, or childhood vaccinations, or highway repairs, or swimming lessons for the kids, there's any number of ways you could spend $100 billion and save a lot more lives than by trying to develop faster propulsion systems to reduce the radiation dose. But this is narcissism. And I mean, you know, the Army has, their slogan is, the mission comes first, okay? And yes, we try to reduce casualties, and we try to avoid the loss of tanks and aircraft and helicopters and everything, but we're there to accomplish the mission. And this has got to be the attitude of the NASA. I mean, could you imagine if Lewis and Clark had come to Jefferson and say, we want to do a transcontinental exploration, and Jefferson had said, can you guarantee me that this is going to be completely safe? Okay, there you have it.
I'll just tell you just a quick little story, which is an aside to what Bob was saying with regard to this risk business. We were doing some services work for Lockheed Martin on the, I guess they were calling it the orbital space plane at the time, during its various evolutions or de-evolutions. And like Bob says, and you hear today, they want risk to be, reliability's got to be 999999999, and you can't follow the nines out to the end. Which was interesting that they want to be able to guarantee that. But then when I was at a meeting discussing the descent of a space shuttle, they were using all these statistics about, well, shuttles are safe to whatever number, and the question came up as to, well, what about the descent? And there was astronauts in the room, and even a program manager at Lockheed Martin, and I won't use his name, but he was an ex-astronaut, and he sat there and told us, well, you guys don't have to even worry about descent. We don't even think about it. And of course, we all know what happened with Columbia a couple of years after that statement, which, so the statistical games that they like to play, it all works in one way when they want to talk about not flying anybody, but it doesn't work the other way when they're talking about what really could be an impact to risk. So it's a rather strange upside-down situation.
Just one little point to add here. Risk is a relative thing, and there's also investment risk and that sort of a thing. What I want to talk about there is the fact that what we are seeing, for example, in terms of the decision by the Obama administration to go out and source launch services from people like Elon Musk or something like that, actually signals a change in procurement policy. And this is an important thing to understand. Up to this point, our system for doing space exploration has been requirements-based. It's where the agency, NASA, dictates literally every nut and bolt and screw, and then the contractors go out and build it. What we have now is performance-based and process-based procurement. Okay, if you get to this milestone, then you'll get paid for this. And this engages the substantially deeper pockets and the risk equations that go along with it of the capital markets and brings them to bear to the benefit of space exploration. So again, in order to understand kind of what could be this move, whether it's tribbles or that 75% of that pie, has yet to be determined, but the potential there is much more in the way of resources, financial resources, much less in the way of risk aversion, and maybe quite possibly the historians will one day write that once we got out of this notion that space exploration is exclusively the domain of government, we actually saw an acceleration in the projection of our presence out in the universe.
Okay, now, I don't want to sound too negative here, but, I'm thinking about when I was a kid, my father was a pioneer in the space program. In the 60s, we lived at Cape Canaveral. A little close, okay. And my perception of this is there were about 10 years of real excitement where it was palpable. And even as a grammar school kid, I felt like, my father was doing something really important that was affecting the country and the world. And there were about 10 years of excitement, and then it degenerated into red tape, politics, slash budgets with more work piled on, depression, stress. Then I saw my brother go through the same thing. He worked for 25 years for a NASA contractor in a different area of research, same pattern. And it seemed to me that at the beginning of both of these programs, Congress and the scientific community shared a vision. They just seemed to share a vision. The vision was senior, and then it degenerated into just politics and bureaucracy. To me, what we're talking about, should we go to Mars, I don't think that's the question. To me, the question is, do we have a government that has the competence and the vision to support the program as it needs to be supported? From the presentation, what I got is that our Congress is already in that last 10 years. I don't see any sign of a vision. And what I saw in the presentation is red tape covering your butts and bureaucracy. So, you know, I don't want to discuss should we go to Mars. You know, that doesn't seem to be the question. The question is we have to have the support. You have to have the structure in place to make it happen, and you must have the vision. And I don't think you can get the vision by preaching. And I could go on and on and on, but I want to hear your view, because I saw this with 2 people in my family, the exact same pattern. And the difference between the excitement and the frustration and depression at the end was just night and day.
All right, so basically, I hear what you're saying, but I do think that we do need vision and leadership in it, but also the American people also need to get behind it. And they also, I think, care too, damn much about things that, you know, their creature immediate comforts and not the things that really matter, things that should be, you know, education of their children and things like that. And it's, you know, we can't always look to the government to do everything for us. I think there are things that we need to drive as a society on our own. And I know it's easier if you have the government pushing something, but let's meet halfway. I mean, that's really how I feel. I've been producing products to try and engage children and adults in seeing space and imagery, and there's just not that much interest in it. And there simply has not been, except in specialized markets. And it's very depressing. And a friend of mine said to me, Theresa, you really need to take into account on your marketing plan that people are stupid. I mean, that's really what she told me. So, I mean, I would love to see the vision of going to Mars. I think we'll get there, but we need to have a national will for it. And I think going to an asteroid would be difficult, but we do things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. That's my viewpoint.
The point you made is exactly the reason why the current policy is wrong. The reason, yes, things worked in the 60s and never since, okay, at NASA, at the Human Spaceflight Program. And that is because there was a clear vision, there was an imperative, there was direction, we're going to do it. And, you know, I mean, just here's a little more of that speech that Theresa just quoted briefly. Kennedy, okay, we choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills, because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept, one that we are unwilling to postpone, and one that we intend to win. This is in some measure an act of faith and vision, for we do not know what benefits await us, but space is there and we are going to climb it. Okay, that was the quality of leadership that they had that made that work, not, well, I think it would be nice to go to the moon someday and we're going to work on technologies and sooner or later it's going to happen. I mean, you know, and the thing that Brian showed, no deadlines, no metrics, no nothing, and no objectives. We're just, Jack Kennedy saying, yeah, look, I think it'd be great if this country went to the moon some days. Why don't you guys go work on it? I mean, that's not what he said. So a clear destination, a clear vision. And if you say you want to go to Mars, you do it the way Kennedy did it. And by the way, that speech was given in September 1962 as this country was on the verge of nuclear war with the Soviet Union, and the stock market had tanked 30% in that month, okay, and the Democratic Party was facing a midterm election of catastrophic nature. I mean, that's when he gave this speech, okay? So that is the kind of leadership that is required. And, the people in this country in the 1960s were just as much a bunch of slobs as today, but they had leadership, and that drew out of them their idealism and their courage and their commitment and allowed them to accomplish something.
Great. That's a great place to stop.
I'll stop.
Okay, if I could ask the last question, I just wanted to poll each of the panelists here. When Kennedy made that speech, that was right after Sputnik got launched.
No, it was 5 years after.
Yeah,
Well, it was
Sputnik
shortly
50.
after, and there was a lot of national pride at stake. Who, in your mind, will be the next country to land on the moon and to land on Mars? Just a quick poll of each of the panelists.
I really have no idea. I think it'll be the country that responds in the same way our country did to Jack Kennedy's speech, by having a clear answer to the question, what's in it for me? And that's what Jack Kennedy was able to do for us at that time. You know, I was young, believe it or not, at that time, and that was the prevailing thing. But there were different ways of valuing that back then than there are now, and we haven't found the same thing. This is why we say the question still is, what's in it for me? And the country that can answer that the best for the people who make the decisions there will be the first ones.
I think the next country to land on the moon will be China. But I think the first country to land on Mars will be the United States. Okay, will be the United States. I think that the pioneer spirit is still there. It's waiting for a leader willing to call on it and draw from us what we're capable. I think we're the ones capable of it. I think when it comes to doing something that is truly new, whether it's the first to fly in the air or the first to fly to the moon, it's Americans that do the impossible. Okay, and that is, the creative spirit. Over half the inventions in the world today are still being done by Americans. More inventions done by Americans than the rest of the world put together. Okay, but we need political leadership that's worthy of us.
I think it'll be China. I mean, India and Japan are both developing space programs, but China, whether we realize it or not, is in big time competition with us. And I think one of the major reasons that we got to the moon under Kennedy was because we were in a life and death race with the Soviet Union, and we lack the same kind of competitive spirit. So I do think it'll be China.
Yeah, I think likely China on the moon, but I agree with Bob. I think it will be the U.S. on Mars. Whether it's NASA or not, I question that. In fact, I think I told Brian one time that, I really felt if we're going to land on Mars, we're going to have to just do it ourselves because nobody at NASA is going to go with it. They'll never get around to it. But kind of relating back to your question about the cycles and the lack of support, just quickly, Constellation is the last in a series of programs, and I refer to evolutions or devolutions. There was the Space Launch Initiative, which was funded, didn't happen. Then there was the Orbital Space Plane that was funded, didn't happen. Then there was something called 2GRLV, which is second generation reusable launch vehicle, which didn't happen. Then there was something called OSP, Orbital Space Plane, which didn't happen. And then there was something called CEV, Crew Exploration Vehicle, or whatever they were calling it. Didn't happen. That morphed into Constellation. Now Constellation is more than likely going by. So whatever it is that Obama's going to do, if the support's not there, more than likely the Tribble project is going to morph it again into something else. So unfortunately, that's the status of the situation. And while there's been this progression of programs through 4 decades, there's been a lot of money made by contractors and such, and a lot of NASA people paid, but the progress hasn't been there. So there's a very good chance we'll, fall off this wagon again, and ultimately it will have to be some private funded something that's going to make this really go. And that's what I just have to say about it.
You get the last word, Brian.
I get the last word. Oh, that's dangerous. I think I would agree with China also reaching the moon first. Mars is, there's so many directions that Mars could take. I would like to see actually people landing on Mars before we return to the moon. It would have to happen in the right way. That's one of the reasons I wrote my novel. It outlines a way that it could happen. Private enterprise, if free to do what they do best, can do incredible things. So it is possible. Is it likely? I'd say what's most likely right now would probably be China, because again, they do have the resources, they have the right mindset in terms of safety. They are a new developing space power. They haven't gotten overly complex in their systems yet. They could perhaps partner with Russia. Russians are great at building simple systems. Well, actually, I think I'm going to change my mind. It could actually be Russia, because if you have a leader right now, here today, in terms of safety and complexity, it would have to be Russia. So I don't know, a lot of directions that the future could take with regard to Mars. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
All right, and I'd just like to really thank all of you for sitting here and listening to this great debate, and especially thank all the panelists for a lively discussion. So thanks all very much.